Give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money, give me money.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, Lily was having a creative block and so scheduled a bunch of list videos in hopes of powering through it. I'm ranking Star Wars characters now, don't at me.
Your concern is noted, but not necessary.
I'm of the opinion that Anakin Skywalker had a much better character arc than people give him credit for. The chaotic mess of blunders on all sides that transformed an idealistic child into the galaxy's worst tyrant is fascinating to consider, and which many properties these days try and fail to repeat. Anakin is a character whose fault can be attributed to things outside his control, but he is never absolved of responsibility for his crimes. It's truly a marvel to see. You can see the inevitable crossroads between Sidious manipulating him, the Jedi being unprepared to handle training someone who has already developed attachments and fears losing them, and his own impulsive decisions caused by the way he allows his fears to dominate him. All these instances where Anakin is trying to seek the wisdom of his mentors, but said mentors have no wisdom to give him and leaving him to figure things out on his own. Everyone has a hand in Anakin's fall to the dark side, especially Anakin himself. Stories like this usually try to absolve the fallen hero in question of responsibility in order to make them sympathetic, but the prequel trilogy is a tragedy, and part of a tragedy is seeing just how much a few different decisions could have changed everything, and instead you watch Anakin consistently make the wrong decisions every time. Anakin wasn't a good person, but he didn't have as much of a say in what kind of person he would end up becoming as he would have liked.
What have I done?
You ruined a perfectly good child is what you did. Look at you, you've got anxiety.
Think carefully on your choice.
I'll never understand the fandom for Kyle Katarn, a mercenary with generic badass tropes until he becomes a Jedi and has to go through the typical Star Wars branded hero story until he just apropos of nothing decides not to, and then decides again when his love interest gets fridged and then turns into a Luke Skywalker clone. I guess his generic badassness is what makes him popular, and he carries the same kind of air as Han Solo or Boba Fett but with a lightsaber. The insertion of Buck Rogers into a series that typically didn't have characters like Buck Rogers. Actually, while we're at it, we might as well add Dash Rendar, Boba Fett, Jace Malcolm, young Han Solo, and Nico Okar to this segment as well, since they're all basically the same character and as such they all have to share.
And there is nothing that can be done because you refuse to listen.
You ever sit back and watch Rebels and realize that Ezra is completely superfluous? Kanan pretty much serves the role of protagonist perfectly, and Ezra's just kinda tagging along. Always seemed like Rebels was trying to make Ahsoka happen a second time, but Ahsoka was actually a fun and funny character until Dave Filoni started overusing her in everything he possibly could.
Why are you putting her in The Mandalorian? Just let this character's story end already.
But Ezra always felt like a hollow addition to the cast, seemingly only there because Disney was under the impression that kids in the audience needed a requisite kid character to point at and go, "Hey, that's me!" But that's never been a requirement before. Even Ahsoka was introduced on the novelty of, hey, what if Anakin had a Padawan, lol. Ezra is the most useless character in Star Wars. Rebels in general is pretty much just the Clone Wars but more sanitized and with Darth Vader in it.
Do not mistake my tone. I was not faulting your choice. Far from it. I respect it.
Trying to praise characters from the sequel trilogy is difficult because many of the best characters are completely shafted in The Last Jedi by a director who seriously misunderstood them and a desire among said director to focus more on the greased weasel. So there's always a lot of asterisks to have to get placed on any given character, but in The Force Awakens at least, Finn is a big ol' sweetheart. I absolutely love him, and his friendship with Poe and Rey is among some of the best material to ever come out of Star Wars. A character who starts out as a bit of a coward but ultimately comes to learn to fight for the right thing, even if that right thing is just the people he personally cares about, which is honestly as good of a motivation as any to fight back against the First Order. And despite the shafting he got in these films, someone at Lucasfilm clearly liked him as much as I do because he got a new love interest in every single fucking movie, which is understandable because Finn looks like he gives good hugs.
You, of all people, would judge me so?
Oh, I'm gonna get some letters for this one. I tried to like Rose, but the fact of the matter is that the film didn't want me to. I know we're all supposed to say Rose is the best thing since tummy rubs because neo-Nazis got really angry at Kelly Mary Tran for existing, but think about what she does in the films. She's the requisite love interest for Finn in what is now a series of 3. She exists so Disney can continue to no homo Finn and Poe, and she says there is no ethical consumption under capitalism that one time. I'd like Rose to be an interesting character, but sadly she needs a director who actually wants to do something with her other than to have her mouthpiece the themes. Good for you, Ryan. You know what symbolism is. Let's see if you can figure out filmmaking someday.
I have endured your corruption of my other students. You shall not have this one.
Okay, I'm really gonna need to explain myself at some point because The Last Jedi really isn't good for my image. When I first saw Amilyn Holdo, my reaction was, hi, I'm a lesbian. She looks fucking cool. And when she took over the Resistance, I was like, alright, what are we doing? Holdo's entire plan is to use the First Order's arrogance against them to sneak away while they think the Resistance has been destroyed, so they can rebuild without the First Order hunting them. That's a fucking genius idea. And then neither the other characters nor the audience is told this until the big twist moment, and the problem with that is that the space in between there is the entire second act of the film. And then when it's finally been revealed, well, Ryan has no more use for this character, so he fridges her for post-crappy character development. God damn it, Ryan. Okay, before we go on, the last two I mentioned are obviously going to be contentious because garbage baby men decided these characters were the worst things ever because Wom's purple hair, tone, and racism. And I want to elaborate more on these two because despite putting them in such bad positions, I actually really like them. Rose and Holdo's biggest problem actually has nothing to do with their characters. Their issue is the fact that Rian Johnson writes like he's expecting his stories to be studied in a high school English class. There's themes for days, especially failure. Good lord, does this movie browbeat you with the theme of failure being a teacher? Did you get the underlying message of learning from failure and the parasitic nature of hierarchies? Yeah, I got it, Ryan. You gonna talk about how clever and subversive and new it is? Wasn't planning on it, Ryan. Okay, I'll just remind you the next time you fucking blink. I highlight Rose and Holdo because they debuted in this film, but no character gets out of The Last Jedi looking good. The film's biggest problem is too much theme, not enough story and characters. Rose suffers a great deal from Rian Johnson being able to write themes, but being terrible at the part where you make an actual story to be enjoyed. So Rose is one part no homo and 2 parts mouthpiece. This is a character who would definitely benefit from all the time that would be freed up if Rian Johnson can stop trying to make Rey fall in love with a literal Nazi, the creepy fuck. It also doesn't help that an entire segment of the film is completely wasted on Rose lecturing a child soldier on the horrors of war. Ryan, what the fuck are you doing? Finn is the last person who needs to learn that, but for some fucking reason, his character development from The Force Awakens gets completely erased so he can go through it again. This whole scene should have been Finn giving this lecture to Poe because Poe is the flyboy who needs to be knocked down a peg, and his friend is in a better position to do that. Rian Johnson severely misunderstood Finn's role in the story. Holdo was often mistakenly accused of keeping her plans a secret from everyone, but in reality, the only one who isn't told is Poe. It's just that Rian decided, apropos of nothing, to have Poe's point of view also be the audience's point of view. So the audience only sees what Poe sees, which is intended to be a misdirection for the audience for needlessly distrusting Holdo, but in practice, this is just frustrating and annoying and makes the entire second act of the film a tedious slog. That's a problem all over the trilogy. The way information is arbitrarily withheld from the audience simply to prop up this idea of a mystery. And it's not helped by the fact that the themes the film is pushing are so simple and straightforward as learn from your mistakes. Pretty much everything the characters do turns out to be a failure, when in reality, you didn't need it hammered in that much. Poe, Luke, and Rey were good enough. We didn't need literally everything else to fail. It's pushing that theme so hard that makes this movie so unsatisfying to watch because you're just watching the First Order win over and over and over again for the sake of a message you already got by the time Rey left Ahch-To. And sadly, because of this, the two characters who were introduced in this film suffer greatly when there was such a good foundation underneath. I will forever consider the fact that they completely wasted a character that had so much potential on a breadtube meme and fridged another character that had so much potential for the sake of the same theme hammered again and again and again to be an absolute travesty. I'm adopting these characters, they're mine now, and I'm gonna do something fun with them. Anyway, back to the countdown.
But only you must know the path you will take. I cannot choose it for you.
The sequel trilogy slowly turning her into a supporting character for Darth Greaseball notwithstanding. God damn it, Ryan. Rey was probably, if not the most interesting, the most enjoyable character in the cast. A dorky jock with an affinity for machines and a talent for reverse engineering that she could even apply to the Force. Rey lived out the self-indulgent fantasies of many a kid by being able to master the Force on her own and consistently win. She's smart, she's powerful, she's fucking angry as hell, and she's here to kick ass and tell the old people why they suck. In the hands of more competent directors, Rey could have been such a fun character on that cathartic spectacle alone. Look at the predatory and menacing way she walks toward Darth Greaseball during their fight in The Force Awakens. That's so fucking cool. Rey has always been the kind of character pitched right at the sensibilities of kids, for whom they would think was just the coolest. A character who could simultaneously be really badass and really adorable. Look at that. She's so fascinated by rain. I love that. I love that you still see Rey experiencing new things in the galaxy. What else is there to say? She's beauty, she's grace, she's a lesbian in space.
It is difficult to center oneself here.
Darth Talon could have been a good character had someone other than the world's most boring man designed and written her. Talon's only existence seemed to be to have a Twi'lek Sith and a skimpy outfit. Perv pandering at its fucking worst in this franchise.
You have failed me. Completely and utterly.
The only reason Arkin isn't number 1 on this list is because you're not actually required to go along with his crappy redemption story, unlike the carbon copy of him later down this list. Arkin is just a power-mad delusional weirdo with a massive sense of entitlement and who uses his abusive daddy as a carte blanche excuse to wage galactic war. And then just as you're about to kill the tyrannical little bastard, his mother intervenes and insists that he's suffered enough and that he can be redeemed. Worse even, if you actually are stupid enough to go ahead with this opens up Arkin as a romance option. And what fucking pile of cartilage in BioWare's writing office decided that this would be a sensible, level-headed thing for the Outlander to do? This guy's tried to kill you every single time you met. He's imprisoned you in Carbonite for 5 years and tried to kill your friends. Good God, this is like Christy Golden writing Raylo fanfiction. Thankfully, you can tell Senya fuck that noise and kill them both, which makes Arkin marginally better than the actual number 1 on this list. At least Arkin is a fun villain to beat the shit out of.
I am Kreia, and I am your rescuer.
Out of all the characters to have served as a point of hatred in Star Wars, the Force itself is a surprisingly underutilized idea, but KOTOR 2 brought that idea out in spades with Kreia, a woman who sees the Force as a malevolent god toying with the galaxy for its own amusement. Which...
we're a dyad in the Force ring.
I mean, she's not wrong. That's a fucking cruel-ass joke the Force is playing on, Rey. Kreia is the kind of character that Luke tried to be in the sequel trilogy, a bitter, cynical old woman who loathes the Force and would happily see nobody in the galaxy so much as touch it ever again. A woman who elects to work in the shadows and remain unseen so that she may complete her work unimpeded, and who fails to see the value of needless sacrifice. A character who is often read as a bog-standard libertarian by thick people because she questioned why the exile so readily gave credits away to a beggar, but was actually teaching the exile a lesson about considering all the possible consequences of your actions before making a choice. A character that, regardless of whether or not you agree with her philosophy or not, is interesting. And good lord, we desperately need characters who are interesting.
Perhaps it is time I considered my methods in this instance.
Imagine Boba Fett, but more egregious. A character notable for being a cool boss fight in The Phantom Menace, but was stupidly brought back in the Clone Wars for fan service, and had a character arc that was alright. Then they brought him back for Rebels and finally let him die, putting this aging meme to rest. Nope. Never has a character in this series been as overexposed as Darth Maul, and that's not to say Disney isn't trying. Ahsoka and the very concept of Mandalorians are certainly getting there. Maul is emblematic of Disney's grave-robbing tendencies, because even when they do create compelling new characters, they just can't fucking help themselves and have to drag a rotting corpse back on the screen. Literally.
What are we if not slaves to this torment?
Maul is the prime example of Disney's over-reliance on fan service, which would reach its zenith with Rise of Skywalker. And I sure hope it doesn't take many more box office bombs and critical flops to finally get this through their thick fucking skulls.
Born of war that has, as always, taught the wrong lesson.
Probably one of the most disturbing characters in the franchise, Koth Vortenna is a cool nationalist who freely licks the boots of Emperor Valkorion, a man who has slaughtered billions in a quest for eternal power.
The Emperor's a great man. If anyone can help you take down Arkin, it's him.
If you knew what I do about him, you'd run. The man killed billions.
He was always good as a cool.
Yikes.
Koth is actually a romance option in the Old Republic, and I can't imagine why you would do that when Lana is right there and doesn't secretly want to fuck the ghost in your head. Oh, you don't like women? Well, Theron is also right there and is also not a fascist bootlicker. I mean, he does betray you.
You'll be disintegrated, and I'll escape with the Adegan crystals. Don't worry. You won't feel a thing.
I could end your miserable life in an instant. But first I want to hear an explanation from the traitor's lips.
Well, there's Arkin. Wait, Arkin? The guy who tries to kill you? What Raylo bullshit is this? Wow, the men in this game are fucking trash.
You are not Sith, not truly. And it is for that I love you.
I've said enough about Lana Beniko to fill several small books, but she remains probably the best character across the entire pantheon of Star Wars. Can I call it a pantheon? Yeah, I'm going to anyway. A Sith with a more pragmatic view of the Force, of whom becomes far more common as SWTOR's story plays out. Lana is fiercely loyal to the people she loves, especially the Outlander. Often one of the most level-headed characters in the room, and the only main love interest who isn't at some point trying to murder the Outlander, Lana has a philosophy about the Sith and how strength ties to leadership that is summed up in 40 seconds that are more enjoyable than the entire 9-film series combined.
But you must admit, it's hardly the Sith approach.
I've grown far stronger working beside her than I ever could have become through treachery.
Intriguing. I suppose the Sith code never specifically calls for the usurpation of the master by the apprentice, merely the pursuit of greater power.
Precisely. It's only natural that the strongest should lead, but the goal should be strength, not necessarily leadership. If one is truly strong, leadership comes inevitably.
A unique point of view among the Sith.
Perhaps that's why we aren't among the Sith now.
A character that deserves her own film, but only under the condition that her marrying a lady Jedi goes with it. Fiercely loyal, the good kind of morally gray, and delightfully gay for her Jedi friend turned wife, Lana Beniko is all the good food Star Wars has to offer wrapped up in a single character. I absolutely adore her, and she is the single Star Wars character I have absolutely zero complaints about. Perfectly written, perfectly handled, best freaking Sith. I love her.
I am tired. The journey has been a long one.
A character for whom the word overrated was made for. Darth Revan has absolutely no characterization in their debut game because they're not allowed to speak because of some stupid idiot twist about the player character having been Revan the entire time. A character who remains a bland, empty vessel for whom the other characters constantly talk about in reverent, tones about how powerful and talented and really they're just so cool, you guys. A character who goes from having no personality in KOTOR 1 to having a reputation as a god in KOTOR 2 to being an angsty emo bastard who would make Kylo Ren look well-adjusted in SWTOR. Revan has established themselves as the Batman of Star Wars, boring, overhyped, and for whom every other character around them is vastly more interesting.
Stay here and die.
Oh, how an interesting premise falls. Kylo Ren went from being a nominally unique and being a highly ineffectual, gawky little dork in The Force Awakens to every single overdone villain with hashtag problems in The Last Jedi, because despite Abrams designing the character to be infinitely hateable, nobody seemed to pass that along to lonely men with inflated views of themselves and straight women with terrible taste in men. Kylo Ren's only redeeming quality is serving as proof that sometimes a pure evil villain is better than the faux complexity that plagued the New Tens, that sometimes maybe you shouldn't appeal to the kind of people who were salivating over Draco Malfoy 10 years ago, that maybe your first idea was the best one and you shouldn't fuck with it just to adhere to shitty trends. A character whose bog standard, by the numbers, woe is me emo story became such a hyperfixation among Lucasfilm that their actual main characters constantly got shafted to make room for this fucking greasebag. The only good thing Kylo Ren ever did in these movies was fucking die.